Hello, hey, what's up everybody? Caitlin Silva here, and welcome back to the 4-day workshop for how you can reach your author goals in the next 90 days or less. I'm so excited you're here. Welcome to day number 2, where we're talking about the real reason why you haven't been able to reach your author goals yet. So I'm Caitlin Silva, founder of The Author Mentor and 3 times Amazon bestselling author, as well as author of numerous other works, some under a pen name, and also having a few years of experience in both the traditional and the self-publishing industry, here to help you be able to actually reach your author goals without having all the mistakes that I had in the very beginning. So yesterday we covered the biggest myth about being a writer, which was that you're supposed to write every day, or that whenever you sit down to write, that it's just supposed to flow like super easy, and a lot of times authors get so discouraged when they see that they're struggling and other people are reaching the goals that they desire. The truth is that we all struggle with these goals, and it is possible for you with the right tools and the right support, which is why we're here for this workshop. So today we are covering the real reason you haven't yet reached your goal, which is if you have not yet reached your goal, or you've been struggling for any amount of time, chances are you're struggling with one of the 5 root causes of writer's block. And yes, these are ones that I've narrowed down after my own struggles, and also after working with hundreds of authors and helping them to be able to finish their books. So the 5 root causes of writer's block include your natural creative flow zone, or rather trying to write outside of it, lack of clarity or direction with your book, and then the last 3 really tie in together, but I go ahead and put them separately because there are different solutions for each one. So there's the naysayers, or people that tell you that you can't do it. There's self-doubt, which is your own inner critic, or that voice inside your head that really discourages you from reaching your author goals. And finally, there is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of so many other different things. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I want to share with you that whatever you've been struggling with, it ultimately ties in under the umbrella of one of these root causes of writer's block. Even if you're feeling like it's lack of motivation or something else, I guarantee it still falls into one of these 5 root causes of writer's block umbrellas. So let's dig in and talk about exactly what those look like and how you can overcome them, so that you're no longer struggling with writer's block when you're trying to write, but instead you can make dynamic progress with your book. So let's dive in. So number 1, the creative flow zone. So as I mentioned yesterday, as we were talking about how to actually make time for your book and how to be able to actually accomplish your writing goals, we talked about the natural writing zone, right? And what this looks like is, as I mentioned yesterday, a natural time of day when your productivity or your creativity is at a peak. When that happens, you're actually able to get a lot more done in that time frame than any other time throughout the day. So what I want you to do is really just take a moment and think about the time of day when you feel that you get a lot of things done. You feel more focused, you feel inspired, you feel like when you sit down, you all of a sudden are able to jump into your zone a lot easier. Maybe this doesn't happen all the time for you, but you should, in your memory, have a specific time of day that comes up for you when you feel like you can get more done. It should be a consistent time of day. So maybe for you, that's really early in the morning, or maybe it's right after lunch. Maybe it's even late night like me. I will tell you guys that mine always hits around 8 p.m. and lasts around 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. So I definitely have to temper that time, so I'm not staying up way too late, especially since I have kiddos at home. So it's really important to know when this time of day is for you, so that you can make the most of it and you can actually tap into this zone as much as possible. Believe it or not, whenever you try to write outside of this zone, your writing can be a lot more forced and less focused, and it can actually cause you to actually have block and struggle, and it can bring up some of the other root causes of writer's block, like lack of motivation, which ties into fear, self-doubt, or even just feeling like, man, I'm not clear on my book at all. So it can actually spiral into all the other root causes of writer's block, believe it or not. I mentioned yesterday 1 hour of focused time can be 10 times more productive than other time when you're not focused, and that holds true for inside your writing creative zone. So if you're already aware of when this time is, the most important thing that you can do is to be able to actually be intentional. We talked about time yesterday and creating that time for your writing. So what you can do is, if you're pre-planning your time and you're doing the things we talked about yesterday, implementing those tools, which I definitely hope you are so you can start getting results, I definitely encourage you to pre-plan when that time of day is for you and make that time intentional for your writing. So especially if it's something that's outside of your work hours, take advantage of that. Or if your natural writing zone falls inside of your work hours, that's okay. It's best to go ahead and plan that time on your day off when you can take the most advantage of it because you're not tired from work or anything else. And you can be intentional. You can set aside that time for your writing, and you can absolutely make the most of it during that writing time that you're creating. Now, if you have a really hard time with setting aside that time for yourself, maybe because of kids or your work or other things going on, especially if for you this happens in the middle of the day like it does for some people, there are some other things that you can do that I want to share with you for getting into your zone and being able to trigger the muse, so to speak. So if you do really struggle with getting into your writing zone, or you feel like that's not something that's as beneficial for you, one thing that you can do is you can still be really aware of what helps you to feel inspired and to really get into the muse. So outside of your writing zone, I want you to ask yourself some questions like, in the past when you've had a huge burst of ideas or you felt really inspired or you sat down to write and everything was flowing really well for you, what were the circumstances that led to that happening? Maybe you were drinking your favorite beverage. For me, I love having a cute coffee mug with some delicious coffee next to me. That really helps me to feel inspired and jump into my zone. Maybe it's a favorite playlist or a certain type of music that you enjoy listening to that just helps you to zone out, lose distractions, and really zone in on your muse and your inspiration. Maybe that means you take a quick jog and you connect with nature. Maybe it's taking a shower. Maybe it's just going to a coffee shop or getting outside of your house because it helps to inspire your brain in new and different ways other than just your home zone, right? So whatever that looks like for you, knowing what really helps to inspire you and get you out of that home zone and into your writing zone is really beneficial, because when you know what those things are, you can do them on purpose in order to trigger your muse on a more on-demand type way, if that makes sense. So that's your homework for today, for sure, is making sure that you know when your creative zone is, or if you're really struggling with that, knowing what helps to trigger your muse so that you can do those things on an intentional basis and really jump into your writing zone whenever you want. But there's still 4 more root causes of writer's block, so let's go ahead and dive into those. So number 2 is lack of clarity or direction when it comes to your book. So I want you to think about your book like a giant forest that you've never been through before, right? There might be logs or beasts or all kinds of different things, right? And if you don't have a clear map through that forest, you can get stuck, you can get off the path, you can get lost and have no idea how to get back to where you were or to get where you really want to go, which is out of the forest, right? So as you're addressing your book, whether you're a planner or a pantser, someone that just dives in and goes for it, I highly recommend having at least some kind of roadmap through your book. It doesn't have to be rigid if you're not a planner. If you're a planner, go as detailed as you want to go. Of course, without writing the entire book out. You want to give yourself a guideline, right? But it could look like a giant poster board. It could look like a bunch of sticky notes on your wall. It could look like a bunch of little bullet points of, okay, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Or for nonfiction, just structuring your content and what you want to talk about and the flow of things of your content for your book, right? So giving yourself that loose roadmap before you start can be so beneficial. And I highly recommend doing that so that you can be clear on your book. Now, I highly recommend doing this on pen and paper instead of just diving right in on the computer, unless you find that your flow naturally happens better when typing. Because believe it or not, your brain actually flows differently when you're connecting your hand to paper, pen to paper. So I highly recommend doing this and just writing things out and getting it outside of your brain before you just dive right in. The reason why is because as you start to get things out of your head and onto paper, not only does it make it visual so that your brain can process it in a completely different way, but it also allows you to get that content that's been muddled and jumbled all in your head into a place where it's clear, it has a flow, it has a focus, and it actually clears up space in your mind to work on new ideas, to create new content, or even just to flesh out some areas that aren't as clear or feel blurry to you right now. It's like driving down a road, right? And imagine this road is straight, and in the distance, things don't look very clear, right? They're kind of blurry. But as you continue traveling down that road and getting closer to your destination, things become more clear. The same is true as you're writing. The more that you continue to put down on the page, the more that things can become clear inside of your mind. So definitely make yourself a roadmap and give yourself even just a loose idea of the flow of content. That way, as you're writing and as you're going through your book, you know exactly what you're going to say, you know where you're going and where you've come from. You can dive right in a lot easier without backtracking and going through everything. And you cannot get, or if you do get stuck, you know exactly where you were going next so that you can keep going. I hope that makes sense. So if you're struggling with the third root cause of writer's block, which is naysayers or people that don't believe in you or even straight up doubt you, I want to share that first of all, a lot of times, maybe these people are friends or family or people that you genuinely care what they think, right? And maybe they have really good intentions and they're not trying to put you down. But the truth is that they are, right? And a lot of times these people are just trying to prevent you from getting hurt, or they're projecting onto you what they believe about them. It's not really about you. The most important thing that you can do is actually set up clear boundaries and stop sharing about your writing dreams with these people, because it protects your creativity and your inspiration, and it prevents you from getting hurt. The second thing that you can do is, instead of going to those people, you still need to have an outlet, right? So I definitely encourage you to become involved in a supportive writing community that can give you that support and that feedback that you actually need. It's really beneficial to get involved and connect with other writers that understand what the writing journey is like and be able to support you through that entire process. So maybe that looks like getting involved in a small community, maybe locally or on Facebook, that can really support you in that goal. I don't necessarily recommend all those big groups out there simply because they're not very well managed admin-wise, because they're so big and there could actually be some harmful people inside of those groups. Instead, I definitely recommend, again, a smaller community that is more well managed and specifically designed to give you that support in a safe, fun environment. You can also reach out and maybe connect with a writing buddy, so a one-to-one type relationship. I can't tell you how beneficial this has been for me, having a writing buddy in my life to bounce ideas off of and share what I'm working on, hold each other accountable, and even provide really valuable feedback on each other's work, because we know what it's like to be in the writing game. We know what it's like to get that harsh feedback, and so we can tell each other what we need to hear without saying it in a way that really shuts each other down, if that makes sense. Finally, another thing you can do is consider getting a mentor. I invested in myself very early on in my writing journey, and it was so hugely valuable for me and made a huge difference in my writing success. I would definitely advocate for this, because the truth is there is so much information out there. There is a ton of resources and books and blogs and websites and all the things that you can look for. But the problem with having so much information is that it's hard to weed through and find what you actually need. In fact, you can end up getting overwhelmed in that process, which can stop you in your tracks and create a whole different type of block, right? So it's important to be able to cut through all of that, know exactly what you need, and have the support to actually push you, hold you accountable, and help you to continue making progress and reaching your goals, instead of causing you to get stuck and never moving forward and actually reaching the goals that you desire, which is where a mentor can come in so valuably. And so I definitely recommend, if that's something that you've been struggling with as far as for overwhelm or naysayers or lack of support, looking into and considering that option. And we'll talk about that more in detail as we continue through the 4-day workshop. So I just want to kind of put that on your radar as something to consider as a solution. Finally, the fourth root cause of writer's block, self-doubt. You probably are definitely familiar with this when it comes to your writing. So maybe it's that inner critic that's coming up and saying, oh, my writing is crap. What if no one enjoys this? What if it never actually reaches my goals? You know, all those different negative self-talk thoughts that keep coming up and pushing down your ability to push forward with your writing. Maybe what that looks like is even just a matter of going back through and self-editing constantly. Maybe you're not able to make the progress that you really want to make because every time you sit down to write, you're reading back through your work and thinking, oh, I can't believe I wrote that. And you're erasing and trying to rewrite or something like that. I can't tell you how many writers I've talked to that struggle with the self-editing, the self-criticism, and the self-doubt. Ultimately, that can also lead to other kinds of problems like lack of motivation and all of that, because you're thinking, what's the point? I don't feel motivated to do it because I don't believe in what I'm doing. That can be such a struggle, right? So the biggest thing that I can tell you if you're struggling with this is also the supports I mentioned in the last root cause of writer's block, which can help you to continue to push forward. However, you can also do an exercise to really evaluate that inner critic and say, okay, is this truthful? Is this helpful? And if not, to reject those thoughts and continue to push yourself moving forward. So what I would invite you to do is get yourself a journal, or if you already have one, which if you're a writer, you might, and go ahead and take some time and actually write down what those thoughts are and what you're struggling with. And be really honest with yourself. Are these things that you would tell somebody else? Are these things that you would say to another writer, or maybe even to your kids, or someone that you really care about? If it's not, then you need to evaluate the truthfulness of that statement and instead write out some other things that will be beneficial and encouraging to you. So if you're thinking, oh, my writing is crap, I want to share with you that, guess what? A first draft is supposed to be ugly. It's not supposed to be perfect. That's why it's called a first draft. That's why there are so many other drafts, right? Editing can solve that problem. And no, I do not mean editing during the first draft, but you can definitely write down. Believe it or not, there are so many authors out there that struggled with the first draft and had so many different edits. They were sick of their manuscript by the end of it. In fact, J.K. Rowling is one of those authors, believe it or not. So editing is a huge part of the process for any author. And all authors struggle with wondering if their writing is worth it. We're all our own worst critics. And that's part of the fun, is knowing that your book still has the potential to reach people, to impact lives, and to make a difference. So I want to invite you to consider that instead of thinking about what if all the bad things, think about the good things. And we'll dive into more details on that in just a second with the fifth cause of writer's block. However, when it comes to specifically self-doubt, definitely take some time to journal that out, what those negative thoughts are, and think about some positive alternatives that you can tell yourself that you would actually say to other writers that you can then say to yourself as well. I want to push you and challenge you not to constantly self-edit, but to just focus on getting your first draft done, because that's what really matters. Now, as I mentioned, for the fifth cause of writer's block, fear. Fear comes in so many different shapes and sizes, and it looks like so many different things. Fear of failure, fear of success. Those are the same thing, by the way, on different sides of the coin. Fear of rejection. Even just fear of your own ability to reach your goals. There's so many different aspects, and fear in and of itself can actually spiral and create other perceived writer's block, like lack of motivation or lack of time, or any of the other ones that I mentioned. It can really actually tie back to fear, because ultimately what you're saying is that well, I don't really want to face that right now, or I'm not really sure how to deal with that right now, or I don't even know what to move forward with right now. It can come in so many shapes and sizes, like I mentioned. And so that's where I would like to challenge you and really say that when it comes to fear, fear is trying to help you avoid something that may or may not hurt, right? Something that may or may not push you in ways that you might not be ready to be pushed. But what I want to challenge you is that I want you to, instead of thinking about all the negatives and all the possible ways that things could go wrong, I want you to counteract that with what could go right. So if you're thinking, what if I fail? I want to ask you, what if you succeed? What would that look like for you? How would that change your life? What would that mean for you? And how would that also then impact other lives and other people? Ultimately, think about authors that you've been inspired by. Think about authors that have made a difference in your life and have really inspired you and caused you to want to pursue this dream of writing in the first place. I want to share with you that those authors had to overcome these exact same hurdles, believe it or not. The difference is that they chose to have the courage to push forward, put their book out there, and do what it took to succeed, regardless of what the outside circumstances looked like. And I want to challenge you to do the exact same thing. The only difference between you and you reaching your success is having the right tools, the right support, and actually taking action toward those goals in the right way. And that's what I'm sharing with y'all throughout this workshop, but specifically for the fear. I want to share with you that your book and your story can only be told in your unique way. Only you have the experiences that you do and the way of saying things that you do. Sometimes you can hear things a million times from a million people, but for some reason, sometimes the way one person says it really clicks for you and makes it sink in and have those light bulbs go off, right? You can be that exact same thing for somebody else. Your book and your story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it deserves to reach the readers whose lives it would impact and benefit and inspire. You deserve to have that chance to do that. And I want you to really consider, what if I succeed? What if I reach my goals? What would that look like? Now, if you do have fear of success as well, and you're afraid of the pressure that might put on you, I want you to just relax. Think about the lives that it could change and the impact and the inspiration that could cause, not to put pressure on yourself, but instead to celebrate that, to really draw on the fact that your book had the potential to reach them and to make that difference in their lives. That doesn't mean that you now have pressure to continue doing things. What that means is that you can simply enjoy and celebrate that and continue to push forward in your own life, knowing that you've made that difference for somebody else. We can talk about that in more detail. If you would like additional support, you have any additional questions on that, feel free to reach out, and we'll talk about that more in the upcoming days. But those are some things I wanted to share with you as you're pushing forward for your goal, and if you've been struggling to really reach the goals that you want to with your book. So to recap, today we've talked about the 5 root causes of writer's block: the creative flow zone, lack of clarity and direction, the naysayers, self-doubt, and fear. If you've been struggling with those, I definitely recommend digging in and doing the homework pieces that I mentioned so that you can actually have progress and start seeing results with your writing. Tomorrow, I'm going to share with you about the biggest mistake authors make when publishing and what you can do instead. So if you've already written your book and you've been struggling with overwhelm in the industry, or knowing what to do next, knowing what steps to take to launch your book, or even if you've already reached that goal but you're still not seeing the results that you want, tomorrow is going to be a big day for you. So don't forget that we're here to write, to publish, and to inspire. I'll see you tomorrow.